Welcome to When You Are the Sandwich. Are you balancing the responsibilities of caring for your aging parents as well as your own children? These can be stressful times, and we're here to help. This podcast is your guide to smoother sailing in the midst of the sandwich generation's balancing act, discussing informative topics to help ensure order in the midst of potential chaos.
Hi, everyone. I would like to welcome Chris Hagan and Alden Whitman from RWA Wealth Partners today. And so I've asked them to come and talk with me about young adults. And we're actually going to be doing two sessions. So this first one is going to be geared for how to financially empower your young adult. And we're actually going to be having a separate session, so please stay tuned for that. That's going to actually talk about, now that you've actually empowered your young adult, how can you as the parent or grandparent help financially assist that young adult? But today we're going to be talking about how to empower your young adult. So now, before we get started, I just want to say that I am so thrilled to have both Chris and Alden here today. Chris, I have actually known for, oh my goodness, Chris, it might be approaching,
Gosh, I don't know.
I don't know,
18?
it's well over a decade. It could
Oh
be,
yeah, closer to two maybe.
but it's scary how long. So I have known Chris for a very long time, and I'm so honored to have him come and speak today, and also Alden, who works very, very closely with Chris. And I know we're going to have a great conversation today.
Excellent. Thanks so much for having us, Tiff.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Tiff. We really appreciate it. We're happy to be here.
Oh, well, again, thank you. So let's get started because there's a lot that we want to cover. So, okay. Now, Chris and Alden, what is your experience with young adults and what you're seeing with clients? Are the young adults actually financially educated, or is there room for some education for these young adults?
Sure. Alden, you want me to start on this one?
Yeah, you go right ahead.
Okay. So, Tiff, great question. So, Alden and I are, at the end of the day, financial advisors. We lead an advisory team at RWA. And our clients are typically either parents or grandparents, and sometimes children. And the education that we see for young adults is not consistent, right? Some communities don't provide this type of education in terms of like personal finance, and some parents don't feel comfortable giving this guidance, or sometimes kids might not want to hear this type of information from mom and dad. So Alden and I have worked hard to try to fill this gap, and we totally enjoy doing it. But sometimes it is spending a decent amount of time with, the kids of our parents, to basically give them some good, hygiene, right, around personal finance.
And that's something, Chris, that I know you and Alden and I had talked about a while back, and this is what spurred this podcast, is that, and this is probably dating myself, but there was no education out there in the school systems that actually helped educate. And I know that today it's a little bit better, but it's still not great,
Right.
correct?
Right. And it's funny. We were thinking about this podcast, and I got something in the mail the other day. It was a mailer for a business that offered to, teach your young adult personal finance because there is a gap.
Wow.
Where my wife teaches, they actually do have courses in personal finance. But yeah, for sure, when I grew up, this was not an option.
Right. And so because of that, it's great to know. So you guys would actually sit down with that young adult and help them to start to build. So what kind of tools would you help them develop?
I'll do my best to be quiet for a moment, let Alden speak. It's hard
Yeah,
for me.
yeah, there's lots of ways that we can help young adults in this type of a situation. I mean, I think like going back to the comment you made before, Tiff, about like just not being, there's not being a lot of education out there. Um, Oftentimes, like what I find is that sometimes kids themselves are not necessarily even comfortable talking about a lot of this stuff with their parents. So like getting the advisor involved early, even if it's just an introduction, the parent can say, look, we work with, Chris, Alden, whomever their advisor may be, might be a good opportunity just to have a discussion and a conversation. But it really kind of depends. I mean, with young people that are just starting out in their jobs or in their careers, like there's so many things to talk about, like things from employee benefits to like different types of retirement plans that maybe they have access to. But even before that, like I think talk about the why. Like, why is it so important to start saving? Like, we talk about things like compounding interest, and it's like sometimes someone would be so blown away by how the math works. That's like, if I just have this little bit of money and it's growing at, make it up, 7% per year, 8% per year, 10% per year. If I'm not even putting that much away, like, how much will that actually turn into 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now? And so I think even just showing simple examples to young people is really pretty powerful.
Yeah, and so now with this example, so I'm now thinking of myself as an 18-year-old.
Mhm.
Okay, this is actually trying to really think back, but thinking about me back when I was 18, I did not have the benefit of having wonderful advisors be able to sit down and talk with me. And not that my parents didn't try to make sure that I had fundamentals. So I mean, I did have a checking account and stuff like that, but I really didn't appreciate what was being told to me.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I remember being young and hearing about that compounding interest is like, oh, I've got all the time in the world,
Mhm.
right? And now
Yeah.
I'm looking back, I'm like, oh, I wish I really did do that at age 18. So, what type of accounts can a young adult set up that can help set them up?
Yeah, a great tool that Alden and I have been using for quite a while with our clients is the a Roth IRA for the for kids that are getting their first job. And here's kind of how it works, Tiff. So say you have a 15-year-old or 14-year-old that might be working at a summer camp, and maybe has $3,000 or $4,000 that they earn during that summer camp work. You, as the mom or dad, can actually put $3,000 or $4,000, match that amount that they earn through that Roth, and put it into a new Roth IRA for them. It's going to have to be a custodial Roth IRA, but it's a great way for when people's tax bracket is super, super low to be able to put money into a Roth that they probably won't later in life won't be able to do because maybe they make too much money at some point down the road. But it's a great way for kids to see, all right, so now here's this Roth. And then if it's invested aggressively, whenever that money comes out way down the road, no taxes are owed on it. And as they have that Roth, they'll be able to see how it grows, right? And maybe if that's a great way for them to actually see, wow, this is my money. Look at how it's growing. And maybe you're investing it in things that you can talk about. Maybe it's NVIDIA or some things like that that might catch their interest. But it's a neat way to actually fund a Roth at a very young age and also use it as kind of an educational tool. Does that make sense?
No, it does. And actually, I love the thought of, just having that soon to be young adult, if they're
Mhm.
14, 15, but having them get some sort of part-time
Yeah.
job to
Yeah.
start getting that experience and being able to have that opportunity to put away and then have mom, dad help with additional.
You know
That's
what's really cool, Steph, Tip, I'll give you a really quick story of something where we've seen clients do this, and I think it's an extreme case, but it just goes to show how creative people can be with these types of strategies. All you need to contribute to a Roth IRA is earned income. So I've seen a situation where an infant, a 1-year-old, the parents got that 1-year-old into modeling, and so they actually had on the books 1099 income, and they started contributing all of the earnings that that baby made from modeling into a Roth IRA and started the tax-free growth investment plan at age 1. Pretty funny. I mean, that baby actually had to file a self-employment income tax return before they could even talk. But there's really creative ways like that where you can start getting kids invested and learning about this stuff at a super, super young age. Now, like I said, that's really extreme. But I think of kids that are maybe in middle school and they're counselors at a summer camp and they have a little bit of earned income. Maybe they could do a situation where it's like they take part of their income and contribute it, and then the parent maybe matches, right? And
right.
so it's just a great way for kids to learn and to get started and get introduced to the world of investing.
That's fantastic. Oh my gosh. I wish I could go back and now start one. Right. So that's awesome. So, all right. So now thinking about that, Now what I want to do is shift us a little bit and talk about, okay, now let's take that 14 or 15-year-old and now have them be 18-ish, and they're
Mhm.
now going off to college, right?
Sure.
They're not in the house any longer, though they still might declare the home as their primary residence, but they're not home anymore. So, and the reason why I want to make that shift is because I have the vivid memory of my first day at college where I went to the bookstore to get my books, bought the books, probably with mom and dad's money,
Mhm.
out of the bookstore. And then there were these tables lined up all along the hallway with all these ways of setting up my own credit card.
Sure. Yeah.
And I had had no background talking about what that meant to get a credit card.
Mhm.
So I want to switch us now and start talking about that young adult who is now really starting to experience these opportunities and maybe potential good things and bad things.
Sure. So I think that what's interesting is that you've talked about kind of getting to 18 or 19 years old, but just remember that that child has been watching how mom and dad spend their own money for all those 18 or 19 years. Um, it's like, so they are picking up throughout just watching mom and dad throughout all those years to see how mom and dad spend. So, when Alden and I go into the office and we see the young, I don't know, 25, 30-year-old that's got Starbucks every day and driving a BMW because they're maybe stretching their dollars to show, what they've got. It's like, ooh, what did they learn at home, right? So hopefully along the way, even before you get to 18 or 19, you are educating this child with how you spend too, right? Because they're watching. But yes, I do remember those credit cards, Tiff. I do remember those offers at the bookstore. It is so important, as you know, for a really strong credit score, and to kind of let that young adult know. But then also where we do a lot of work is with budgeting. And I know it sounds kind of boring, but it really is. Like if you can kind of put together a good budget, then you really feel good about how you're spending your dollars on a monthly basis. And that's something we do a lot of work on. Alden, how about you? Did you have any different answers?
I, Everything you said is spot on. One thing that I like to do with people to try to drive home the point that you made about responsible spending habits is like, you mentioned the Starbucks, and it's easy to go to Starbucks every day and spend what does it even cost now? Like $8 for a cup. I don't even know, but it's easy to go to Starbucks and spend $8 a day on coffee, and then to say, well, it's only $8. It's not that big of a deal, but I always like to try to annualize those types of small expenses. All right. Well, it's like, okay, so if you're spending $8 per day on a cup of coffee and you do that for a year, how much are you spending on that coffee? And so, like, I think thinking about it that way makes a lot of sense. And then, like, your point about tracking expenses and budgeting is another one that's super important. And it's hard because a lot of people don't know exactly what they're spending, but figuring out exactly what you're spending is the best way to determine how much you can really save, right? And so, there are budgeting apps and tools out there, and they're kind of a dime a dozen. There are some that maybe are better than others, and there's free resources, and it's all great. But I think like a simple way to think about it, in a way which I think resonates with a lot of people, is like most people put most of their expenses on their credit card. And as long as you're paying it off in full every month, you're not really paying any interest. I mean, that's kind of the responsible way to do it. Um, but if you're doing that, like in mostly all your expenses are on your credit card, look back over the past 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And I know expenses are going to differ from month to month, but kind of look at what on average, you've spent over a longer period of time, and then maybe add in some additional, fixed expenses that don't go on the credit card. And that gives you a pretty good sense of what you're spending. And I think once you kind of understand that, you can see if there's maybe areas, talking again about Starbucks, where you can maybe cut back a little bit, or areas where it might make sense to make changes.
Yeah. One other note, like when you're taking out the $8 a day for that Starbucks, that's also money that's not earning anything. That's missing out on that compounding. So it's not only it's like a drain from your budget, but it's you're taking that away from the upside that would have the opportunity to grow.
Got it. Got it. And so then it might not be a bad idea to start establishing a credit rating. So therefore, to get a credit card for when they get into college, start really creating that budget. I love that. And then what do you guys think about credit freezes for young adults?
We just we tend to recommend credit freezes for just about anybody that we work with. You just need to know like how to remove that credit freeze when you're going to be maybe getting a new credit card or if you're going to apply for a loan of some sort. But we just unfortunately there's just too many instances that are popping up where we have calls from clients where it's like, gosh, you know what? Somebody compromised my data or somebody filed unemployment claims using somehow my data. So we are a fan of credit freezes, unfortunately, today.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
and
also really great credit monitoring agencies out there. Like LifeLock is one that comes to mind, just not to give them a specific endorsement, but they're just a very well-known provider. And I think, there is a cost associated with that, but to Chris's point, there's just a lot of fraud out there these days. And I think being well protected is never going to be a bad idea. And the beauty of those types of credit monitoring companies and agencies is that they're proactively monitoring all of your assets and your credit. And if something happens, or if a new credit card or a line of credit or a mortgage is taken out, like they're going to ping you and make sure that it actually was you that tried to take out that loan. And if it wasn't, then they're going to help you right that wrong. So, I think that's something that everyone should at least consider and look into.
yeah, and that makes sense. And again, not a plug for LifeLock, but I can tell you, having been with them for many, many years now, they do ping you if anything happens. And so it
Mm.
really is very helpful. And I also have to say that for the credit freezes, and this is what we tell our clients with the law firm as well, put on those credit freezes. And I have definitely noticed over the years the credit agencies have gotten much easier with figuring out how
Good.
to unfreeze and then freeze again. It used to be a pain in the neck, but it seems to be much easier
Now
today.
you can even pick the length of time, right? Tip for the
Right.
most part. Yeah.
Exactly. Like we'll have to do it sometimes for the law firm for whatever we're doing. And because of that you can make it for, 24 hours. So it can be very, very short.
Right. Speaking of the law firm, when I was thinking about when you're turning 18 or 19 and going off to college, that's when we're calling UTIF,
Correct. So
right?
yes. So for those that are listening in, even though we're sponsored by the O'Connell Law, which is the law firm that I founded. And so one of the things that the law firm does is we actually want to see folks when they turn age 18, because a lot of
Yeah.
people don't think, oh, wait a minute, age 18, they don't need any kind of estate planning, legal documents, but lo and behold is once you get to age 18, you do. You should be having a healthcare proxy or an advance directive or healthcare power of attorney, depending what state you're living in for different terminology, as well as a financial power of attorney. Those are key documents that any 18-year-old should have because once someone gets to age 18, they're legally an adult, whether
Mhm.
they're acting like one or not.
Absolutely. Right.
Right. And so if mom and dad are like, oh, we'll be able to make any decisions or be able to take care of anything. Oh, no, you won't. Legally, mom and dad aren't entitled to be able to make those decisions unless that now adult child had legally authorized them to. And that requires having that healthcare proxy and financial power of attorney in place. So, yes, any 18-year-old mom, dad, you should be encouraging them to make sure they get those documents in place. And I know our law firm has a special package for young adults just for that. And I'm sure there's other law firms that do it too. But they are available and they should be put in place. So Chris, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we work with doctors who want those documents in place, Tiff, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because it definitely, luckily, we haven't had it happen for any of our law firm clients directly, but indirectly, we have definitely heard stories of folks having a nightmare because those documents were not in place.
Right.
So we
Right.
never want that to be a situation for anyone. So now, and again, I can't believe how fast time flies. Oh, we're now going to accelerate that young adult's
Sure.
education. So now they've graduated and they're going off to their first official job.
Sure.
Chris and Alden, what kind of advice would you have for that now launched young adult?
Yeah, I think that when young adults first start off in that new job, and I kind of can remember this too, is like the benefits were kind of like overwhelming, right? Like, oh my gosh, I'm barely making enough to get by. Like I'm eating ramen and occasionally having a Bud Light. Like, do I really want to have a 401k? I don't even know what that is. So we we talked to young folks and about that, the benefits package and kind of all parts of it, whether it's 401k or 403b, even like, their health savings accounts, if they're offered to them, what those can do and how those can be so powerful over a long period of time. So I think that the benefits package is a really important place to start, and especially as Alden mentioned, that compounding thing is really kind of crazy. There's a book that we give out to young folks we work with too. This one's called the Psychology of Money, but it's got a section specifically on compounding, Tiff. This one, the book's a few years old, but it says 81.5 billion of Warren Buffett's 84.5 billion net worth came after his 65th birthday. Our and it says our minds are not built to handle such absurdities, but it is crazy that once you get to a certain level of dollars, that just growth grows upon growth upon growth. So, starting early in those benefit plans are really, really important.
Right. And it's so even that's even if the employer doesn't match it, right?
Even if it just, the such an important thing is habits. Like, when we think about like when we do financial planning with clients, it's like for our younger clients, it's not like, well, can you retire today or tomorrow? That's way out in the future. But can you build good habits today or when you've got those first jobs? Like, that is the important thing with the young adults in the first jobs is controlling the spending. We work with corporate 401k plans where we kind of spend a lot of time with all different level of employees and from CEO down to people who are just getting started, and we've spent time with people that are just getting started that are really behind because they have not only like credit card debt, medical debt, right? These are things that are really hard to climb out of. So if you're a young person that can get ahead of these things and really start good habits, that's huge for the long term. Sorry, Alden, I'm talking too much.
No, I think it's a great point. And I think like talking about some people that are struggling, like it's really hard to dig yourself out of a financial hole. So developing those positive habits early on just sets you up so much for success because I mean just take the last couple of years as an example. I mean, if you've had a little bit of money, maybe you owned a home, you have some money in the stock market, like there's been a lot of growth over the past several years in the market. Like your net worth and your assets have gone up, up, up. If you've owned a home, if you've owned a home, like the value of your home has probably gone up a lot. But you have to get there. And like the way that you get there is by developing these good financial habits early on, saving, budgeting, putting money into your retirement plans, those types, living within your means, like paying yourself first is a term that we use a lot. Um, you know, go the other direction and say like you didn't really know or you weren't educated on these types of things and you didn't start developing those good habits. Now fast forward, maybe you're in your 30s or you're in your 40s and you have a mountain of credit card debt and you're renting and you don't really have a lot of money in the market. And guess what? If you have credit card debt, you're probably paying 18, 19, 20%. So like how hard is it to get out of that, right? And if you're paying that and you're focusing on paying down that high interest debt, you're probably not going to be able to max out or even maybe even contribute anything to your 401k plan. So you're just you're just pushing yourself further and further and further behind. And most likely you're probably renting. So instead of seeing the value of your home go way up and your equity increasing, all you're seeing is higher inflation and your rent going up every year. So you get the point. Like you see how it can be very hard, for somebody to play catch up later in life, which is why it's so important that we're talking about this stuff now.
Right. And Alden, I think that just really cements why I wanted to have this conversation. Because if we can get to those young adults and have them create those good habits, it can help so much in the long term. And I love this. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so many times Chris and I have said like you'll meet with the client and they're later in life, and maybe they're in a good financial situation, but we kind of look at each other and we say, gosh, if we had just met that person 20 years ago, we could have avoided so many things that, could have improved their situation now. And so that just kind of ties in again to what you're saying.
That's great. And so now, Chris, I know you had mentioned one book. Is there
Yeah.
any other books that you guys think of off the top of your head that people should be looking at, or?
Yeah, we like the Psychology of Money is by Morgan Housel. That's a good one that that we talk quite a bit about. Another one is The Millionaire Next Door, which has got a lot of similar trends, right? Stuff like, you're not the car that you drive. And those are a couple that we use quite a bit. Alden, any that jump out for you?
No, I think that the Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel is a great one because it gets into the emotions of money. Like it talks a lot about um, things like being envious of others people's wealth and like somehow, sometimes people view money as like they're always comparing it to someone else and there's always someone else that has more. So I think like digging into the psychology is really interesting and really important, but I think it gives you a good perspective as to like what's this money for? Like what does it really mean? How much do we really need? And so I think that's a really good one.
That's great. And so, and then I'd like you guys, if you don't mind, to also provide a way for people to reach out to you in case they might have any questions and as an additional resource. So how would someone find you?
Sure. So our website is pretty easy. So rwawealth.com is the website. And then or 800-492-6868 and ask to speak with, one of us. I think that's probably the two easiest ways, Tiff.
Wonderful. So, Chris Hagan and Alden Whitman, I thank you so much for talking with me today on this topic. I'm looking forward to having our next session, which is going to be to how a parent and grandparent can help the young adult. So that's just a little plug for folks to watch for our following podcast after this. But gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us, Tiff.
Hey, thanks, Steph.
And everyone for listening in. As always, thank you so much and stay tuned for our next episode. Take care, everyone.
We are happy to be sponsored by O'Connell Law. To learn more about what they do, visit o'connelllawgroup.com.